Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to A Speech a Week. My hair is still dishevelled from the taking of the thumbnail. I thought I'd give Brutus a slightly dishevelled look about him as he sees Caesar's body being walked through Rome. I hope you're all doing really well. I'm finally double vaxxed. My glands are a bit swollen under my left arm, but that's okay. I'm hoping that will go away very soon. I know my little white blood cells are working nice and hard because of science. And I'm really excited today to do Brutus with you. So if you're new here, just to spell out what we do, I'm not just going to read and act it at you and for you. The whole point of this is for me to lift a speech off the page, especially a classical speech. That's what we tend to work on. And work through it with you so that we explore it, we can play around with it. I always enable the live chat function on here when I go live so that you can interact with me. We can talk about the part, we can talk about the character, ask questions if you're stuck on any bit, or if you have suggestions about what it could mean or translate to, or how you would act it. That's what this is all about. So I see this as a safe space for us actors and creatives and Shakespeare lovers to get together and explore a little bit of the Bard's work every single week. And just a heads up, I can see I've got some of the regulars on now. This week we're doing Brutus in Act 3, Scene 2 at the Forum. We're going to be starting from Romans, Countrymen and Lovers, not to be confused with Antony's speech further along in the same scene, shortly after, Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. This, when I suggested that I would be doing the Brutus speech, we often think of the famous Julius Caesar speech as being the Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. However, I wanted to start with Brutus's because Antony's speech is actually a kind of play on Brutus's speech, and often we forget about that one and just go straight to Antony's, and that if you Google it, that's the one that comes up, right? Speech from Julius Caesar, it's always this speech. However, Brutus is an interesting character, as we looked at when we looked at Portia from Julius Caesar, that wonderful scene between her and her husband Brutus, where he's conflicted and she's not getting any answers out of him and she's concerned for his health. We didn't really look at Brutus's character too much, only in his generosity to acting with Portia. Now we're going to look solely at Brutus. So although I don't want to kind of go into the whole story too much because we run out of time, I want to just give you a kind of brief overview. So Caesar has been assassinated by this point. Brutus was part of the, sorry, some adverts are popping up on my page. I don't want to see that. Let me get off. And yeah, Julius Caesar has been assassinated. Brutus was part of the conspiracy gang to get rid of Caesar. The reason they killed Caesar is that he was acting like a bit of a dictator in Rome at the time. They wanted to keep it a republic. They wanted the power to be in the many and not the few. However, Caesar was quite popular with the plebeians, with the community, the public of the time. So his murder has actually really quite upset the people. And remember, the people as a mass can far outweigh the few. So these are dangerous times. And remember, although obviously this was written in Shakespeare's day, they probably would have set it back in the day, 40 BC or whatever. So, well, he was assassinated 44 BC, I think it was. So remember in these days as well, death, I've talked about this before in the sonnets a lot, but death, and even in Shakespeare's time, death was a real thing that you were confronted with pretty much every single day. Healthcare did not exist. First aid probably wasn't a thing. And if you were stabbed, you'd probably get an infection and die. So one thing to remember about the given circumstances of the time of this play and also of the real thing, life and death was a real thing. Losing my articulation there. How do I say this? They were dangerous times to live in. If you upset someone and really upset someone, they might just think, do you know what? I'm going to stab your eye out and kill you. As happened with a famous writer. If anyone knows which writer was stabbed in the eye, let me know, during a pub brawl, tell me, of around Shakespeare's time. So, yes, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I should tell you from my notes that I've taken about this. So let's look at Brutus as a character as well. If you are here joining live, hello, do say hello in the chat. I'd love to know who you are and where you're from, and whether or not you're an actor as well, because that's good to know. Brutus is kind of dubbed the tragic hero of Julius Caesar. He is really close with Caesar, and one of the main kind of things pre-assassination of Jules, is that Brutus is kind of treated a bit like a son and a really good friend by Caesar. So Brutus is really conflicted about killing him. However, he does think, although he doesn't really, he's a bit umming and ahhing a lot of the time, he does think that Caesar having power is a bad thing. And you'll hear in the monologue that we're looking at today, he talks about Caesar's ambition, and that was a bad thing, as if it was a sin, as if it was a crime, and therefore he deserved to die. His ambition was too great. He was looking at controlling us all, and that wasn't okay. So I'm just trying to think of any kind of modern dictatorships that are quite useful to bring up, and there's a few, unfortunately, but the one that brings up memories for me is Saddam Hussein, and that whole thing. I remember seeing loads of that on the news. My dad always used to make me watch the news, and I remember being really scared of this guy. Have a little look up of modern dictatorships, recent dictatorships, and see if you can put it into context of this time as well. So I'm just looking down at my notes. I probably shouldn't look down. I should be holding them up reading, shouldn't I? Just trying to think if there's anything else. If there's anything else any of you guys want to add that you know about Julius Caesar the play, or something that you think is interesting in the actual history of that time, do let me know. And we're going to have a little go, I think. Shall we do that? Yeah. So as always, what I do is I read out the speech. I give it a bit of an act, but I'm not here to impress you with my notorious acting. I'm here to... Notorious. I wish. I'm not here to impress you with my acting. I'm here to simply lift it off the page for you so we can get a good feel for what it is that we are looking at today. And what I will do is, after we work through it, I'll read it, we'll work through it. After that, I'll read it one more time so that we can see if there's any differences, see if I change anything up, or rehearing it might provoke more thought about that line, or that word actually meant a lot more after we talked about it, all these sorts of things. Hello, Ernest, you're here. You're here on time. I'm so glad to have you. Welcome back. Hello. Ernest has got a good working brain knowledge about this play. So I'm very intrigued to see what we've got coming up. I went through the videos that you sent me about, I'm thinking Marlon Brando. It was Marlon Brando, wasn't it? Tell me. Hi, and Rodney's here. Hi, Ernest and Pippa, he says. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that during the workshop. But for now, let's have a little read through of this speech. If you are listening, or you have the script to hand, I'd actually recommend that maybe you close your eyes and just simply listen, or you can read through and just pick out words that I'm saying and things like that. Up to you, but let's see what tickles your fancy today. Let's have a go. Oh gosh, I did talk a little bit then, didn't I? But it's good to give a bit of context, isn't it? So, this is in the forum. Caesar's body is coming through shortly, and Brutus wants to address the people, kind of calming their stress about the fact that Caesar's dead. Because remember, the public did quite like Caesar, even though he was, operating a dictatorship in Rome at the time. Let's go. Romans, countrymen and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. Censor me in your wisdom, and awake your senses, that you may the better judge. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than that Caesar were dead, to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honour him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honour for his valour, and death for his ambition. Who is here so base that would be a bondman? If any, speak, for him have I offended. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? If any, speak, for him have I offended. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any, speak, for him I have offended. I pause for a reply. Then none have I offended. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol. His glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced, for which he suffered death. Here comes his body mourned by Mark Antony, who, though he had no hand in his death, shall receive the benefit of his dying. A place in the commonwealth, as which of you shall not? With this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, I have the same dagger for myself, when it shall please my country to need my death. I wasn't going to go on to that bit, but actually you kind of have to. So there you have it. I've lifted it off the page for you. Might have been a bit loud because I was trying to address the nation. What do we think? First thoughts? Fill me in. If this was the only kind of speech in the play, I think it would be a fairly average example of rhetoric practice. It's not a bad speech. It is not in verse. Excuse me. Excuse me, the sneezes are back. It's not written in verse. Mark Antony's is, just saying, but we'll get to that next week. It's written in prose. It's written as a normal guy. Brutus's status of the time, throughout history it's slightly different, but in the play, he's kind of been brought up by Caesar. Caesar stops him dying, protects him, and then kind of raises him up the ranks, and Brutus becomes one of Caesar's trusted advisors. Just grabbing a nose napkin in my little flower pot, random old lady box. Love it. They are good friends. Something that really kind of spoke out, well, there's two things that leapt out for me as I was doing this. The irony, and not the irony, but the honesty that Brutus has. He says that I slew my best lover for the good of Rome. I have the same dagger for myself, when it shall please my country to need my death. I will kill myself with that same blade that I killed Caesar when my country needs me to. And spoiler alert, cover your ears if you don't want to hear it. He kills himself at the end. So he stabs himself. So we need to remember that with Brutus, yes, he's the tragic hero of the play, but there's a real honesty to him. And I think because he's risen up the ranks and was maybe brought up a little bit more as a common man, he is not as well educated in rhetoric as someone like Mark Antony. He is not your average villain. He's kind of the underdog that done good, but he's also betrayed his best friend. So we've got a really lovely, what makes this play so interesting is this lovely conflict between him and his actions. We love seeing people in turmoil, don't we, as audiences? Ernest says, doesn't get old, spoken in plain language. A HS student doesn't have to work to get the gist. Probably why we study JC so often in HS. HS? History student? History student? JC, Julius Caesar, HS? High school! I was thinking, like, what other character's name begins with a H and a S? Couldn't think of anyone. High school, yes, exactly. And so, yeah, when we workshop this and kind of translate it, it doesn't actually require that much translation. And I'm sure many of you, thanks, guys, we call it secondary school, so that's why that really didn't click. It is quite straightforward. So, the other bit that stood out for me as well that I just want to bring up, I was pausing a lot after the questions. You know that I always say questions need to be asked. He's speaking to a very big crowd. If one person had a question, the others might have a question. So he actually does say after the list of questions, when he says, who here is so base that would be a bondman? If any speak for him, I have offended. Who is here? And there are well, no, it's not a colon, it's a mark where I've drawn on the script. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? If any speak for him, I have offended. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any speak for him, I have offended. I pause for a reply. None, Brutus, none. Then none have I offended. He says, I pause for a reply. So I think you need to perhaps not let the audience, the masses of Rome, have too much of a pause for a reply, but he still does need to ask those questions, but he does answer them himself. So in other speeches, quite often the character will ask a question, they don't answer, but here he is, which also, in my opinion, shows the flaw in his rhetoric. So when I talk about rhetoric, I'm talking about the study of public speaking, the use of words in public speaking. Every politician that stands on a podium is an orator of rhetoric. And especially back in the Roman days, I think they particularly had powerful, strong orators that could talk. I say orators, I know what I mean. Speakers that could hold an audience, and they knew what to do. They were educated, they were charismatic. The Romans were very interesting people. So Ernest says that Brutus has conflict on the surface and conflict down in his soul. Absolutely. We can appreciate him on several levels. Is he a leader or has he been duped? Great character. Yes, actually, and this is quite important to remember too. So throughout the play, Cassius is kind of the lead conspirator. Historically accurate? Perhaps not necessarily so. There was a lot of people that were actually conspiring against Caesar. You know, these were trying times. It was a big place at the time, lots of different conflicting ideals and ideology. Cassius is sort of a bit like the Iago in Othello's ear. He's kind of constantly putting the pressure on Brutus to conform to this conspiracy idea. And if Brutus was for it, it would help recruit other people that maybe were nervous about what Brutus would think. So yeah, that's something quite important. Cassius is a bit of a manipulator in this story and puts the pressure on Brutus somewhat. So again, something else to analyze about his character is has he got a backbone? What does he actually believe in? He's quite easily manipulated by Cassius and other, the pressure to conspire against Caesar, yet his loyalties probably lay with Caesar. Like, he's helped him, he saved his life, they're best friends pretty much. He trusts him, and that's wherein lies the heartbreak and the tragedy of this story. He absolutely fucks over his best friend and kills him in a horrific way. Oh, right. So what else have we got here? Yes, timing on the pause is important, right? And I don't think I did it justice that time. The attendees did not expect to be given a time to respond. Brief pause, they are still in a surprise state. Longer, they might think too much for Brutus's sake, 100%. But he appeals, and Ernest goes on to say, but he appeals to Brutus's good nature
to do an evil deed. Yes, so he's talking about Cassius there, I assume. Lovely. And yes, I've spoken to Rodney on a personal level, professional level, about pauses and allowing people time to think. This is really interesting for you, actually, Rodney, in your line of work and speaking to a large group of people. Looking at this speech actually might be quite helpful, especially Mark Antony's speech later on. Yes, Ernest says exactly, the pause speaks volumes. Pauses can be louder than the spoken section and the passion. Again, this is something I see as an audition panelist often. We often think that by displaying the passion and being loud, we're getting our point across more. No, if anything, when we hear a loud noise, we back away or we cover our ears and but pausing, enabling the silence, creates a sense of intrigue. Did that work? I think it did. I think it does. So good. So that was what I wanted to say. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add. It was mainly those 2 points about the end of that speech. And I think it was a point actually that Rodney said, yeah, brief pause, they are still in a surprise state. Longer, they might think too much for Brutus's sake. So yes, this is it. If they overthink it or start to talk, it's harder to shut a big group up. So you can see that this is what I want to say. You can see at the beginning of the speech, the beginning of the scene, the citizens, we will be satisfied. Let us be satisfied. And it doesn't say so in the script, there's citizens, 1 plebeian, 2 plebeian, 3 plebeian. Shakespeare doesn't do that very often. What it means to me is that there has to be a lot of actors around, or at least 4, shouting and screaming and yelling at the conspirators, the people that are about to present the funeral. And then Brutus says, then follow me and give me audience friends. Cassius, go you to the other street and part the numbers. So already in the opening of the scene, Shakespeare is like, this place is thick and fast with people who want answers or want to mourn or who are grieving. And so can you imagine in the Globe, I 100% believe they would have done this in the pit. Maybe not with some of the actors' egos and costumes, I don't know. And God knows what was on the floor in the pit, but they might have actually used them and had the actors planted around. And a good production at the Globe will utilise that in modern times. So bear that in mind. I think that's a really magical thing. Gives me goosebumps thinking about it. Ronnie says, yes, thanks, Pippa. Ernest says, if you want someone to pay attention, whisper. Exactly. You see it in films. They do it better on films because you can't really shout and scream on films too much because it makes the audience go ugh a little bit more. The most moving scenes on film are often the really soft spoken ones because you can go to that small level of dynamic to tell the story because the camera can capture everything. The microphone can capture everything. It is harder on stage. So again, if you can act this shizzle on stage, doing it on film will just be an absolute piece of cake. Big believer in if you can do this on stage, you can do anything on camera. So those that will hear me speak, let them stay here. Those that will follow Cassius, go with him, and public reasons shall be rendered of Caesar's death. So already, this is a character insight decision that I'm making about him. Brutus is already asking the masses to split, maybe because he can't handle everyone. He's saying, go over there if you want like the actual reasons, like actual kind of like politic reasons why we've done this. And some of you come with me that want to hear me speak. So already he's fully aware that the audience don't all like him or want to hear from him, or, you know, it's interesting. You don't see Barack Obama or even, well, I'm not going to bring up the other ugly misogynistic man that somehow managed to make it to presidency last year or a few years ago. He's already splitting people. He's already kind of like, you know, Barack Obama or even George Bush wouldn't have been like, yo, so those of you over there, if you want to hear like something else or like the science facts, just go with my, you know, chief political advisor to tell you that. But for those of you who actually like me, you can just stay here and we can have a little chat. What? No. So it shows the level of his, I think, humility, Brutus's humility, and his kind of humble human nature. He isn't a trained speaker. He isn't someone who knows how to address the masses. And I think he's grieving at this point. You know, if someone had a strong background, Frank Underwood in or Claire Underwood, let's talk about Claire, in House of Cards, wouldn't really shy away from the limelight. And I think here Brutus is, which shows that he is maybe an honest man and really does believe in the Republic and really does feel bad about Caesar's death, which makes him more human. He's not a cutthroat politician, which is what most of the plebeians thought of the Senate at the time, hence the whole debacle here. He's also naive. Yeah, there's absolutely naivety about him. Interesting. And just quickly going back to Portia too, in that scene we did where he's talking to his wife and his wife is trying to get answers from him, it kind of also shows that she talks about being Cato's daughter, well reputed. She talks about the fact that she married him. He is well reputed. I think there is a real sense of lack of confidence and self-esteem here, and a kind of in above his head element, which I hadn't really thought of before. So if you are doing this speech, it's imperative that you read the whole play in any situation as well. If you're looking at a character, you've got to read the whole play and see how other people talk about him and address him or her or them. So that's what's happening. Plebeian 1 says, I will hear Brutus speak. Plebeian 2 says, I will hear Cassius and compare their reasons when severally we hear them rendered. So already they don't trust each other. They're like, all right, you go hear him. Oh, I'm going to hear him speak. Okay, well, I'm going to listen to Cassius and let's compare notes afterwards. Already there's a distrust. There's an unsettlement. There's a horrible thing going on. There's a sense of unease. Like, who can we trust? What is going on here? Plebeian 3 says, the noble Brutus is ascended. Silence. And then Brutus says, be patient till the last. So this is quite important to remember as well. Ernest says, for me, the most accessible of the tragedies. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think this and Macbeth, I think, are really way up there. And I think it's because it's not about leading into battle. I think, obviously it is, but some of the other history plays are quite, and even joke, like, the character La Pucille, like all of that, the stakes are, it's all about a battlefield. And even I think in one of the prologues, what is it, Oh for a Muse of Fire, all of that speech is about, imagine we're on a battlefield, trying to get the audience to buy into that, and it can be harder for a few minutes. Seen a bit, Rodney, walking the puppy. We're just going to get tucked into the actual text now. Brutus says, so we've got a plebeian that says silence. Brutus says, be patient till the last. Then he says, Romans, countrymen, and lovers, exclamation mark. Hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. They don't shut up straight away for him. So plebeian 1's saying silence, silence. Brutus says, be patient till the last, like be patient. Romans, countrymen, lovers, hear me. They're probably still not quite quiet enough yet. So he's not already, these are little ways that Shakespeare is showing us that Brutus doesn't have the command to stand up, raise his hand, and get everyone to shut up. You know? Really, really interesting. Subtlety. So if you're working on this speech, you've got to make sure you remember that these people are not just going to shut up and listen to you. You've got to earn it. So, Romans, countrymen, and lovers. Romans, countrymen, and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. Censure me. So, like I say, this is written in prose. There isn't much poetic technique to this speech at all. There's some elements within it, but this ain't no blank verse. This is not any kind of poetically written, divine, romantic tugging on the heartstrings speech, even though that's what he's trying to do, tug on their heartstrings and get empathy and get them to understand why he killed Caesar. He doesn't have the technique, the foundation behind him to do that. So he's asking people to be quiet. He addresses them first, Romans, countrymen, and lovers. Why do you think that's weird? I feel like that's really weird. And we're going to look at it next week, so I don't want to go into too much. But Anthony says, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. You gentle Romans, he even says before that. And even in the lead up to his speech, all and plebeian 3 and 2 say, peace, let us hear what Anthony can say. Peace, ho, let us hear him. So they're already, the audience, the public are already saying, shh, let's listen to him. More of them are doing that for him than they are for Brutus. Yes, he appeals to their civic status first, says Ernest. It's interesting, isn't it? Not by accident. Exactly. So Brutus addresses them Romans first, which is like a status thing. Mark. I was thinking Bridget Jones when I say Mark, when she's calling out the window because he's read her diary. Anyway, he says friends. He calls them the thing that would have lower status, but actually if you're friends with someone, that has way more status than the fact that you're both Christian or both from Essex or wherever you're from. If you're actually friends with someone, your loyalties lie more with them. You know each other. Mark Antony addresses people in a way that is more comforting. Ah, friend, not foe. Brutus doesn't. Romans, countrymen, and lovers. I find that really weird. What do we think about the lovers bit? Countrymen, again, I'm just kind of taking that as people maybe that are a bit more on the outskirts of it, who maybe don't associate themselves with being Roman, because there was a divide. There were people who were, like I said, plebeians, and others that were, what's the word? Optimates. So prior to Caesar maintaining his dictatorship, he was kind of working alongside Pompey before he actually killed Pompey, or beat Pompey or whatnot, or Pompey died. I think I might have got my wires crossed there with some of the history. Yeah, I can't remember. Did Caesar kill Pompey, or did Pompey die in another battle? Can't remember. Not important at this point. But still, there were people who kind of believed in reform and easing off a little bit of the Roman way, which are the Caesar's people. And there are some people who are like, no, we need to be proud Romans and we need to stick to our guns and we need to, like Orthodox and unorthodox Jews or Christians or whatever. Some people, and Catholics, we've all got different religious beliefs, but some people believe them stricter than others. Is what I'm trying to say. So Caesar was kind of leading the reform, the modernizing thing, and Pompey was a little bit more like, no, we're Roman, let's stick to that. So Ernest says, my translation equates lovers with friends. Okay, interesting, yeah. And Brutus does say that he was lovers with Caesar, or something like that. He says that, I think, I must have made that up. So it's me, la la la. We'll get to it. However, Shakespeare uses friends other times straight up. Yeah, exactly. So I just think it's odd. Lovers. I think for me, friends, if you're friends with someone, that has a real weight to it, and there's a solid foundation of that friendship. You know that person. Lovers, and obviously I know like star-crossed lovers is often said of Romeo and Juliet, and they actually really loved each other and all of that. But often I think if someone's lovers, it's just the passion and the physical stuff. And I know that Brutus isn't saying here, like, you're all my lovers, but I think he's trying to appeal to them all. But it's just a bit off. If someone's your lover, it's a more intimate thing, but a lot more personal. So I think it shows again the naivety of Brutus's rhetoric technical ability. He should have said friends, but he doesn't. He says lovers, which is just a bit wrong. and not wrong, but like it's just not right. So interesting. And there's an exclamation mark there. Hear me for my cause and be silent. Hear me for what I'm about to say, for what I've got to say to you. In my mind's eye, I read brothers. Oh, see, if he said brothers, that would have been even better, because friends are friends, but family come first usually, don't they? Well, I would say. But he doesn't. He says love it. It's icky. I feel like it's just a bit off. So yeah. Hear me for my cause and be silent. Hear me for what I've got to say, what I need to say to you, and be silent that you may hear. It's a bit like a teacher telling the class to shut up. Listen to what I've got to say. If you're quiet, then I can hear. He's spelling it out. So again, I'm getting like patronizing tones, even though again, this is not his intent, I'm sure. He's not quite good at intriguing and listening to them or himself to get them to listen. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. He's asking them to believe what he has to say. So already, if you say you've got to believe me, you're already surely thinking and doubting that they're not going to believe you. Another weakness, another kind of thing where the audience, when I say audience at this point, and maybe the real audience, but the plebeians might actually be a bit like, okay, so I've got to believe you, but why? Surely it should just be truthful anyway. Do you know what I mean? If someone's just going to tell you the truth, they'll just tell it. But if they ask you to believe them first, they're probably going to lie. So really cleverly written and very subtle. Like I said, if this was the only speech at the funeral, I am sure we would be like, yeah, it's quite good. You know, it's interesting. It's not in verse, but it's not. Shakespeare, I'm sure of it, would have written this one and worked through Mark Antony's, making sure that every line could kind of combat one of Brutus's, or the other way around, maybe written Mark Antony's amazing speech and was like, right, I need Brutus to say it the same thing pretty much, kind of, but worse. So that's what he's doing here. Believe me for mine honour, and again, his honour is questionable. Believe me for my honour, for my status, yeah, your honour. In fact, let's look up honour, because that's a really powerful word, and we don't use it much these days. So, high respect, great esteem, blowing his own trumpet a little bit, maybe again. I don't know. He's making it about him a little bit and getting them to believe him. And this is what Mark Antony does so well. It's not about him or Brutus. It's about Caesar. Adherence to what is right or conventional standard of conduct, that's honour, regard with great respect, fulfill or keep an agreement, I honour that. And already his honour is under question, under scrutiny, in my opinion. He's killed Caesar, who people loved. He's dishonoured Caesar in friendship by killing him. If I killed my best friend, that's a dishonourable action. So the irony here is that he's saying, believe me for mine honour, yet does he have much honour left in the eyes of these people? Probably not. Remember, most of them were for Caesar. And have respect to mine honour. He's asking them to respect his honour. How can you respect an honour that has been dishonoured? That you may believe. So again, it's kind of like, he couldn't think of anything else to say, says the same thing. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. It's just not, doesn't have the bounce or the flow of the rhythm that we get when we work in blank verse with Shakespeare. Censor me in your wisdom and awake your senses. If you censor someone, you kind of blur them out. You forgive perhaps, or forget certain parts. And I think here he's saying, censor me in your wisdom, forgive me, allow me this this crime I have committed, perhaps. Ernest says, Shakespeare can sling some ink. So when a main character seems to stumble in his delivery using inelegant prose, there is a reason. Shakespeare wants Brutus to be one of us in this situation. 100% agree with that. He wants the plebeians to subconsciously identify with him, or maybe I'm totally wrong. No, I agree. And this is the tragic element. Like he's an everyman. I think Brutus is an everyman part, or every person. He is a normal guy, yet he's got all of this stuff. Like I said, he's over his head. He's in over his head. He's been brought up through the ranks a little bit in the play because of Caesar. He doesn't really know what to do politically, or how to behave properly, or he doesn't know how to cover it up and put the face on like Claire Underwood would, or Frank Underwood would, or how other politicians in recent light might. Boris Johnson might. You put this front on like, well, no, nothing's wrong, it's all fine, but it's actually not. Like, people need to be spoken to properly and have the facts. And I think Brutus isn't well educated enough to know how to handle that. He doesn't know that when he goes home to Portia, he needs to just be like, hello, darling, how are you? Just going to make some food, but we'll have a chat in a little while. He doesn't. He looks sad. He looks distressed. He isn't okay. So he really is struggling with the whole acting like a bigger fish in the small pond. He's kind of a small fish in a big pond right now. Rodney's back. Quick walk, lovely. Yes, Ernest, Brutus is partway through and starting to doubt if he's really coming out unscathed. Yeah, he still doubts his actions. He's not someone who's done it and gone, yeah, I'm 100% glad we did the right thing there. He's still like, please believe me and know why I did this, because I still don't quite believe it myself. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. Exactly. Oh, look, another weird hacking person. I am going to report you so bad. And guys, if you could report these idiots as well, that'd be really great. These robots or whatever. Report. Sorry, bear with me. I really don't like to let these things sit on there. I think they're dangerous. Don't want anyone hacking into my account or anything. Great. So we've not got too far, but we're going to get through this a lot quicker now, I think, because we've had a lot more of the character debate, and we've had, it is quite clear to understand if you understand the whole context of the play. So censure me in your wisdom, which is nice. He assumes they have wisdom. He tells them they have wisdom. Use your wisdom and censor me, and awake your senses. He calls on their senses, and this is something that Shakespeare does. But again, rather than saying something like, feel the wind on your hair and the taste on your tongue, rather than doing that, which Shakespeare would have probably done if it was Mark Antony, we'll see next week what he does with Mark Antony, he just says, awake your senses. It's not as specific, it's more generalized, it's more open to interpretation, that you may better judge. Do they need their senses to judge, or is it they need to understand what's going on? Again, get to the point. He's not getting to the point quite yet. So again, thinking about that, it's like he's saying, I'm trying to think of an example in like a sonnet or a bit of imagery that Shakespeare has said before that is coming to me, and it's not. For example, actually, I'm thinking of Amelia's speech when she says, and have we not affections, desires for sport, and frailty as men have, and our palates for both sweet and sour? She picks up on all the different senses, but she's being quite specific. Sweet and sour. By talking about that, it's going to make you kind of go and salivate a little bit more. But he doesn't do that. He says, awake your senses. Wake up, maybe. Almost shaking them. And again, that's just going to put people off, isn't it? So anyway, he's a grieving man. How can we expect him to do this so well? That you may better judge. So he's asking them to judge. He's not saying, and this is actually another thing. He's saying, you need to judge for yourself. Whereas, what was the speech we looked at recently where it's like, well, it's obvious. For example, we haven't looked at it yet, I don't think, but Edmund in King Lear, thou nature, thou art my goddess. he's saying like, and his argument for how being born illegitimate is nothing. He sometimes characters will present an argument in a way where it is facts. So they're going through their argument, and then they're like, so Edgar, I must have your land. So obviously, and they make people just believe them by being like, well, it's obvious, isn't it? Yeah. And you see this on like documentaries, true crime documentaries, when people are like, well, it's obvious though, isn't it? Like the people who are most manipulative, like Iago as well, I'm sure he's got some examples of this as well. He's like, well, I did see that, and I didn't want to say anything, but actually, yeah, I think she's cheating on you with that other guy. Isn't that Cassius as well, actually? Interesting. So, but he doesn't do that. He's still like, look, just listen to me and you can judge for yourselves. And I think if any other man spoke like that in this play, maybe it would have been a little bit more, cleverly done. But he's not saying, look, it's obvious we had to do this. We had no choice. He's saying still like it's open to interpretation. And therein lies a problem, I think, for Brutus's status and the way that people will believe him and use this speech. Rodney says he lacks finesse in the attempt to nudge the crowd towards sympathy and more respect for him. Exactly. And like I said before, I don't know if it was while you were away, Mark Antony never asks them to respect him or think about him, I don't think. We'll look at it next week. He just makes it all about Caesar. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. Straight on to Caesar. Nothing about him. It's not about him. It's about the fact we've killed this man who really believed in you. So, if there be any in this assembly, another thing already, if there be any in this assembly, he's confronting them. He's trying to provoke them almost, which he needs to do, but he's doing it in a roundabout way that doesn't really serve his argument. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. Referring to himself in third person, therefore disconnecting himself a little bit. It blocked that comment, Ernest. I'll show it, you little rat bag. Don't do it to me, I hate it. Ugh, it freaks me out. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, and again, that's questioning their actual friendship with Caesar. Most of the UK population don't know Boris Johnson on a personal level, right? So if someone then said, like, let's say that, well, I shouldn't say, you can't say that, but let's say like that I was talking to you about a politician, let's generalize it. And I was like, oh, if any of you are really good friends with him, speak up now. Fact is, no one was. Like, only his good friends were good friends with him or her or whatever, yeah? It's kind of being like, oh yeah, actually, I didn't really like Caesar that much, which is good, a good thing, or not like him. I wasn't actually that close with Caesar. But also, it's a funny thing to bring up. Any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. He's making it all about him and his guilt, his feelings for the fact he has committed this crime. Well, it's not a crime, is it? I suppose, well, it isn't. It's an assassination, isn't it? It's awful. But he's saying, if any of you were that close to Caesar, I say to you that my love to him was no less than his. And they don't know how much Caesar loved Brutus or trusted him. Yeah, they might have seen he was his advisor. But again, he's using ways to describe the situation that maybe aren't crystal clear to the people he's addressing. If he'd said something like, do you remember that time at the public speaking where we laughed and I spilt a drink on him and he thought it was funny and we were still best friends and you all saw that? He doesn't go, again, it's not specific enough, I think. I don't know why that analogy came up in my head, like them just joking around in the public eye. But yeah, it's interesting that Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. We had a mutual thing.
But again, that's going to make, surely, if you were listening to that, you'd be like, well, why the hell did you freaking kill him then? It's only going to invoke more anger in me. If I was someone watching that, well, why did you dishonor him? You've asked me to believe your honor and respect your honor, and yet here you are saying about how much you loved him, which therefore makes your dishonor more disgraceful. Interesting. How do you know that, Ernest? Ernest says, mafia guys say, who loves you more than me? Right before the hit. Brutus does not use storytelling. No, he doesn't. It's all about being more Anthony. Let's get more Anthony going. Moving along before we're here forever. Oh my God. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. He's putting and whenever you put words in someone else's mouth, it's annoying, isn't it? If I started saying like, oh, well, Rodney, if you, said to me this, and again, it could work well, but I don't think he's using it well. He's saying if that friend, like that analogy is dead, no one here is a dear friend. It's not true enough, Or if I said like, oh, Rodney, if you said something that you just wouldn't say, you'd be like, well, you don't know me very well, do you? It's exactly what he's doing here. He's trying, but he's disconnecting at every opportunity, but connecting more to himself. This is an ego speech. This is all about him. And that's not the way to go when you're speaking to the masses. If then that friend demand why Brutus, and again, it's that choice of words. It's not like if that friend gently asks, why did I do this? It's demand. If someone demands something of you, it's normally more aggressive. Why Brutus rose against Caesar, and that's a confession. He's saying, I rose against Caesar. It's not painting him in the best light, is it? Ernest says, not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Here's a great example of how he uses rhetoric well, but we're not there yet. This is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. There's a good bit. It's not that I loved Caesar any less, but my love for Rome, for you, the people, our country, was more than that. And I think that is where it works. And so, despite everything I said, I'm playing devil's advocate with myself here, despite everything I've said about how shocking the first load is, it's actually okay, because if he's kind of putting himself down, and this could be a technique in itself, I'm not convinced it is, but if he is putting himself down in this bit and being a little bit more inarticulate, and maybe he could be using his emotion to make him come across a little bit more discombobulated. When it gets to that bit, it could be really amazing, heart-wrenching stuff. But is it? Is it as powerful as it could have been if he used better rhetoric in the first few bits, which I think it would have been? And also, it doesn't, Shakespeare, as a clue for this, as to why I've done devil's advocacy, but also I'm going back on myself now to go back to my original thought, which is like, it's just a bit crap and he doesn't really know what he's doing. Shakespeare doesn't then introduce blank verse. Sometimes he'll guide us in and out of it. Not usually between like in the same speech, but he does sometimes. So he's put here, not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. So already it's a 13-syllable sentence after the colon, which is a bit odd. It's not a 10-line one. We could probably have made that a 10-line one if we wanted to, but Shakespeare didn't. It's not that I he could have said him less, but he doesn't. He says Caesar. Again, by using his name a lot. And Mark Antony uses his name a lot, but also not as much, I don't think, as he is doing here. I think it's on like every freaking line, pretty much. Not that I loved him less. Not that I loved him less. Not I loved him much, but loved Rome but loved you all more. Like there could have been, he could have done something else there. I'm trying to think of a really quick way to make it an iambic pentameter line, but I couldn't. Not today, but play around with that. How else could you say that in a 10-syllable line that is perfectly bouncing and poetry defined? Shakespeare could have, but he didn't. Why didn't he? I think he's trying to make a point here that he's just a man, an ordinary man. I was about to say idiot, but that's not true. I think he's just trying to show that he's an idiot man. That was me just being like, oh, he's such a knob, but he's not necessarily. Anyway, moving along. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. And this is something Shakespeare does often as well, and I've talked about it in the sonnets. Something less, but that I loved him more. It's the da-dum, 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 da-dum. So although it's not that 10-line syllable, it is a slightly, is it 13? I said 13. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. 13. But there's still a good rhythm to that line, which makes it rhetorically and poetically and makes it better than the rest of the things he said. And I think from this point on, he does get into his groove a little bit more, but it is still in prose. So it still does lack the romanticism and the, wonderful poetry that Shakespeare often provides us. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than that Caesar were dead, to live all free men? Now he's got questions. So questions are great rhetoric devices. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than that Caesar were dead, to live all free men? So now he's saying, would you rather have Caesar alive and be a slave, or have him dead and be a free man? And remember, this was a really big thing back in these days, this idea of oppression, slavery, dictatorship. Having one person in power often meant that they were the wealthy one and the few were kind of the scurrying ants around, whereas what Brutus has killed him for is to keep it a republic, keep it a equal playing field for everyone who lives there. And the Romans were notorious for slavery as well. So although, were the slaves around at this point? Disgusting. It's, who knows? Sounds elevated and noble, but manipulative as hell. Yes, that's it. It's the surface to the uneducated, and this is why Trump did so well. Like to the I don't want to insult people, but for the uneducated few or the uneducated masses that were given all this BS, you believe it on the surface level. But if you actually dig deeper and research and look into these things, there's a manipulative behavior there. He's playing on the fact that these people don't really know what they're talking about, but also he doesn't really know what he's talking about because he's one of them. The uneven syllables, 13, means an abbreviated ending and one stays on more, expecting more syllables. Yes, which is a good thing in rhetoric. It leaves the people wanting more. So when he does that, it is normally an indication of an unfinished thought, or the character is thinking, or they're using it, because this is a political address, he's using it as a means perhaps to get them to listen more. But then he goes on and uses it in a strange way, I think. It's a bit better, but still not quite better. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than Caesar were dead, to live all free men? He does the kind of same thing. Would you rather he was less and more? Would you rather he was living and be slaves than him be dead and live all free men? So he's using the rhetoric structure now of using different images to make you go, would you rather this or that, the this and that thing that Shakespeare does, which is good, but it's still not concise enough. He could have written that in a different way that made it, like in the sonnet format, something about the moon and then something about the sun, something about the nighttime, but something about the morning breaking, like that kind of opposing imagery. He could have done that, and he didn't. So I think that's all, he said, asks that question, no answer. He carries on. So again, leaving a pause to get the audience to think, but maybe carrying on. As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. And again, bringing it back to himself. So that question there, had you rather he were living and die all slaves than Caesar were dead, to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, it's back to him again. No, they don't care about him. They care about Caesar. He's the one that's dead.
They're probably annoyed at Brutus, but they don't want to make it about Brutus. They need to grieve. They need to understand what was going on here. And by making it about himself, they're not able to, I think. As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he loved me, I weep for him. I weep for him because he loved me. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. I celebrate his wins. When he did well, I rejoice. I'm happy about that. As he was valiant, I honor him. Again, honor. What honor do you have, Brutus, to honor him with? But still, as he was valiant, and valiant is often a noble word that is used to describe a man of honor. Lady Percy says it, the valiant became the accents of the valiant when she's talking about her dead husband, Percy. Valiant. I honor him. As he was this valiant man, I honor him. Like you would a man in a battlefield. I'm thinking like shields. I'm thinking he would bow down to him. He would be complicit, not complicit, but compliant. But, and this is good, he's used the rule of three, which is something you've probably heard of. He says, as he loved me, I weep. And again, that could have been, as he loved me, I weep. As he won, I won too. Do you see how I'm saying the same thing, but it could have been shorter and clearer and a little bit more poetic, but it's not. Why has Shakespeare done that? Because we've got to not fully connect with Brutus. We've got to see him as lesser than that of Antony. Antony has to win this argument for Brutus's tragedy to mean more, for his conflict to appeal to us, the audience, the groundlings, and all of the people in the play arena of the audience, to really feel for him. So the rule of three. As he loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoiced for him. As he was valiant, I honored him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him. And that's a really key bit that when Mark Antony is listening to this speech, he picks up on and really uses brilliantly well in his speech. So again, we'll come to that next week. So yeah, remember, Ernest and Rodney, next week, we will be looking at Mark Antony's version of this. So he's done that well, but not well enough. Again, it's just always a bit under par with Brutus. So yeah, he's saying that as he was as Caesar was ambitious, he wanted to control the whole Roman Empire or whatever. I had to kill him, and the way he says, I slew him. If someone is slain, in fact, let's look up that word. It's not like he doesn't say I let him sleep or I put him out of his misery. These are phrases that are used to kind of soften the blow of death, right? He didn't say that. He says he slew. If someone is slain, oh, it's an ice hockey term. Didn't know that. Okay, let me just put slain, because slew is like past tense of slain, isn't it? Or slay. Oh, bloody hell, hang on. To kill, especially in a battle or war. To kill someone violently, wantonly or in great numbers, slay the enemy, broadly, to strike down. He doesn't think. But this is, again, it's not that he's not thinking here. I think he just feels so freaking bad about what he's done. He's just so caught up in his own grief. I've slain my best friend. Think about that. Two different versions of the same character who's just killed their best friend. Take it out of context of the play. One says to the policeman, I killed him. I put him out of his misery. You'd more likely empathize with that character than this character who is like, I slayed him. I slew him. So I violently killed him. Hockey, not ice hockey. Oh, it had an ice hockey picture up when I looked it up. Other types of hockey need a modifier. Hockey is hockey. Clever. I used to play hockey. The British one with the bat that looks like that. The bat that looks like that. You know what I mean? Anyway, right, back on topic. So again, it just shows that Brutus's mental state about the murder of his friend is not good. He's not happy about it. He's not proud of it. So there. I slew him. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition. He's literally done. Then he gets rhetorical about it. Then he introduces a bit more rhetoric. Exactly. I should have just read that bit when I was trying to think about how to snip it down a little bit. So he has to reiterate. And again, if you're reiterating something, it's because you don't think people understand you. So he's still, and maybe that's because the plebeians, the audience, don't believe him. Maybe they are just a bit more like, or maybe it is in his head. I mean, he's got to rebound off what the audience are giving him, his audience are giving him, but still, interesting, huh? And death for his ambition. So yeah, there are tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition. Who is here so base that would be a bondman? So let's look up bondman. And this reminds me of Shylock, the idea that if you are someone who like collects bonds or deals in bonds or something, you are a money-grabbing, horrible person. But I'm kind of just putting my own spin on that. I'm not sure how accurate that is. So a bondman. Ah, a slave. Right, of course, duh. So see, interesting. Look up these words so you don't just say it what you think it is, you actually know. So again, he's talking about slave. Who is here so base that would be a slave? And remember, base, in Edmund's speech, he says it all the time, base, 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 the bottom of something, the absolute scraping of the barrel. Who is here so low that would be a slave? So again, questioning their integrity. I don't know if that works. If any, speak for him I have offended. And of course, no one wants to be a slave. And in those days, that was very real. Very, very real. It's still up, Ernest. It's still up. Get involved. Get involved. It is up there. I edited some of the beginning spiel out as well, so it's slightly shorter, which is good. So yeah, who is here so low that would be a slave? If any, speak, for him I have offended. And again, it's not for you I have offended. Speak up, because it's you that I've offended. It's for him. It's just a bit off. And then he carries on. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? And if anyone stuck their hands up, they probably would be sent to death. So again, it's kind of using a dictatorship way of fear-mongering to get them on side. He's not actually explaining why he did it. Caesar was becoming controlled. He wanted more power. He would have abused you. He doesn't say that. He's saying, he's just starting to kind of insult them a little bit now, I think, and scare them. If any speak, for him I have offended. Another rhetoric advice. He's repeating himself, but also it comes across quite patronizing and quite just off again. I can't quite put my finger on it, although I think I am putting my finger on it. Indeed, Charlotte was Pippa at her best, Ernest Lapointe. Bless you. Thank you. That's very kind. I don't think I'll ever get cast as Shylock, unfortunately, but well. If any speak, for him I have offended. Who is here so vile? Again, it's not, he could have asked this question better. Who is here so honest that would not love Rome more than love Caesar? Who is it? Like, he could have put a positive spin on it, but he doesn't. He's putting this negative spin on it. He's insulting them. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? He's questioning their patriotism. If any, and this is something that has definitely been done in recent events with a particular US president. If any speak, for him I have offended. I pause for a reply. So self-indulgent. I will pause for a reply. And then he gets one. None, Brutus, none, says all. Yeah, because they're probably absolutely, excuse my language, but shit in a brick about being executed for not being a patriot. Is that a word that you only use for America? I'm not sure. Let's have a little look. Again, my partner's been making me watch lots of kind of like, what was it, like White House Down or whatever, all of those kind of like action hero things. Yeah, one who loves or supports his country, usually doesn't necessarily mean, but it was part of the American Revolution. Yes, of course, the patriot, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Little education for me there. And then moving on to this final two chunks of the text, we've got a little stage direction there. Enter Antony and others with Caesar's body. So Caesar's body hasn't actually come through yet, which is another thing. I think Mark Antony plays this very, very well. If he is waiting and he's absolutely listening to what he's saying. He decides when to bring the body out. 100%, I'm absolutely sure of that. Tactical plan and plot there. Okay, we're going to whiz through this because I've got a student in about 15 minutes. then none have I offended. So they say, none, Brutus, none. He says, well, then none I have offended. So this is better. This is what I was saying earlier. It's trying to get people to understand that we're on the same page here. When people do that, it's a very clever, manipulative thing. And I think, although his rhetoric isn't quite there, this is more of what he should have done, like getting them to speak. He's used scaremongering, I think, to get it. But when they say none, he's like, well, there we are then. Then none have I offended. I haven't offended anyone. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. And this, I think, it's a bit strange. Yes, please do, Rodney. Sorry, it does overrun a little bit. I didn't quite anticipate the speeches a week would go over an hour, but here we are. They're much longer than sonnets, so that will probably happen from time to time. Then none have I offended. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. And again, it's about him. You should do this to me because I killed him. I killed him for you. Now, when I need to, and I think that's the argument here, isn't it? When I need to die, you can do it to me because it's for my country. I love my country. Yeah, Brutus could be the original patriot, couldn't he, actually? The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol, his glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced, for which he suffered death. So this is a little bit more discombobulated and a bit long-winded, if you ask me. So let's have a little think about this. What do you think about this line? The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol, his glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced, for which he suffered death. So I think he's saying for his good things, he will stay in that glory. For his bad things, he had to suffer death. And the question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol. And again, capital, his glory not extenuated. Let's just quickly look up. A building in which a state legislative body meets. So yeah, the Senate meeting in the Capitol. And then extenuated. If you extenuate, it's a strenuous adjective. Oh, strenuous. A strenuous activity or action involves a lot of energy or effort. His glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy. Avoid strenuous exercise in the evening. So extenuate. Interesting. The word it's related to is actually not like the word it is. It's not extenuate, it's extenuate. That's a bit odd. Anyway, debilitating. So yeah, let's just recap that bit there. The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol. His glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced, for which he suffered death. We're not. So I think what he's saying there is like we're not gonna. You know, after someone dies, you often think about just the good things. He's trying to remind them of that. He's like, we're not going to paint out his good things bigger and better than they were, but we're also not going to underplay his ambition. We are going to make him pay for that, which he did. They killed him. Please share the YouTube link with Rodney. You have his email. He's married and remember the King tragedy. Would also give him some context for next week. Yeah, sure, I will. And then Antony enters with others and sees his body. Then Brutus says, here comes his body, mourned by Mark Antony, who, though he had no hand in his death, shall receive the benefit of his dying, a place in the commonwealth, as which of you shall not? He's saying so Mark Antony is even going to benefit from the death of Caesar, including you. We're all going to benefit because we've all got a place in the commonwealth, the common the republic. We're all one, we're all equal. And he shouldn't have said, though he had no hand in his death. He should have just said, here comes the body by Mark Antony, not mourned by Mark Antony, by Mark Antony, who shall receive the benefit of his dying as well, just like all of you. But he doesn't. He highlights the fact that he is mourning, and then he highlights the fact that he was not a conspirator in his death. He's innocent. So again, it's this constant conflict between accidentally pointing out that he's guilty and someone else is innocent. Do you know what I mean? It's so funny. So funny, but not funny. And it's a question again. With this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, here he goes again, I have the same dagger for myself when it shall please my country to need my death. So I get what he's trying to say here, but he says it in a way that doesn't quite work. I'll kill myself and I'll be slain myself when my country requires it. But don't forget, I also killed Caesar, and I slayed him violently. So great. Keep saying slayed. That's definitely not right. Meet my friend. He's not a child molester. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's odd, isn't it? So there we have it. I'm going to read it one more time through because I have got a student in. Oh, and I really need to send her a Zoom link. I'm going to read it one more time through and we'll go from there. So this is Brutus's speech in Act 3, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar. Romans, countrymen, and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe. Censor me in your wisdom, and awake your senses, that you may the better judge. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves, than that Caesar were dead to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honour him, but as he was ambitious, I slew him. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honour for his valour, and death for his ambition. Who is here so base that would be a bondman? If any, speak, for him I have offended. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? If any, speak, for him I have offended. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any, speak, for him I have offended. I pause for a reply. Then none have I offended. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol, his glory not extenuated wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced for which he suffered death. Here comes his body, mourned by Mark Antony, who, though he had no hand in his death, shall receive the benefit of his dying, a place in the commonwealth, as which of you shall not? With this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, I have the same dagger for myself when it shall please my country to need my death. Again, a crap ending. He's saying, don't worry. It's like he's just still saying, I've done something bad, but don't worry, I'll be punished appropriately. There's no belief in his actions at murdering Caesar. And therefore, he's kind of, this is a justification speech. And it sucks. My wife is amazed that you can talk so long. Well, I just waffle a little bit, but I've really got to run, so I've got a student in 10 minutes and I need to send her a Zoom link. So good to see you. I'm so glad you made it today, Ernest. I'll get back to you, please. There's a really long-winded email to you in my draft inbox, but I'm literally getting emails, adjusting my calendar. Adjusting my calendar is sending out emails at the moment and coaching people, which is great, but it's just been a bit crazy. So I will get back to you properly, hopefully very soon. hopefully today. I've got a bit of time later on this afternoon, but who knows? Things always crop up, don't they? Well done, everyone, for getting on live. Well done for watching this back. If you have made it all the way through, doing this level of depth of work and analysis is going to make you a better actor and a better understander of Shakespeare's work, okay? So I know these are long-winded, but that's the work, and the joy comes from the work, doesn't it? So enjoy, have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. And next week, we'll be looking at Mark Antony's speech from the same scene and looking at the comparatives between the comparisons between both speeches. Bye for now.